I want you to think about something for a moment. Every single week you drive to a grocery store, hand over money you worked hard to earn, and come home with fruit that was picked unripe, shipped thousands of miles, gassed with ethylene to simulate ripeness, and priced higher than it was last month. And next week you do it again, and the month after that, and the year after that, for the rest of your life, unless something changes. Here is what changes it. There are fruit trees that people planted 100 years ago that are still producing today. Trees that survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, multiple recessions, and every supply chain disruption in between. Trees that fed the families who planted them, then fed their children, then fed their grandchildren, and are now feeding great-grandchildren who never even met the person who put them in the ground. That is not gardening. That is generational wealth in the form of food. I am going to show you 10 fruit trees today that do exactly that. Trees you plant once in your yard this season and that will still be producing food long after you are gone. And before I get to number 1, which is a tree so productive, so long-lived, and so completely ignored by modern gardeners that I genuinely believe it is the single most valuable food plant you can put in the ground, today, I need you to stay until the end. Let's count it down. Number 10, black walnut. Let's start with the tree that most people think of as a nuisance, and that serious food growers know is one of the most valuable plants you can put in the ground. The black walnut is a native North American tree that can live 200 years or more. A mature black walnut produces 100 to 200 pounds of nuts per year. The nuts are rich in protein, healthy fats, magnesium, phosphorus, and antioxidants, some of the most nutrient-dense calories you can harvest from a tree. And unlike most fruit trees, the black walnut requires virtually no care, no spraying, no pruning for production, no irrigation once established. It grows in zones 4 through 9, tolerates a wide range of soil conditions, and once it reaches maturity around years 10 to 15, it simply produces year after year, for the next 2 centuries. The one caveat everyone mentions about black walnut is juglone, a chemical the tree releases from its roots that inhibits the growth of certain plants nearby. Keep it away from tomatoes, peppers, and some other vegetables. Plant it at the edge of your property, along a fence line, or in an area where nothing else is growing. Give it space. It will reward that space with more food calories per year than almost any other tree on this list. And here is the economic argument nobody talks about. Black walnuts sell for $8 to $15 per pound, shelled at farmers markets and specialty stores. A mature tree producing 100 pounds of nut meat per year is generating $800 to $1,500 in food value annually from one tree you planted once. This is a tree for people who think in decades. Plant it now. Number 9. Persimmon, American native. If you watched my video on forgotten fruits, you already know how I feel about the American persimmon. But it belongs on this list too because as a long-lived fruit tree, it is in a category almost entirely its own. The American persimmon Diospyros virginiana is native to the eastern United States and grows wild from Connecticut to Florida, from Kansas to Texas. It tolerates temperatures down to -25 degrees Fahrenheit. It grows in poor clay, rocky, compacted soil where almost nothing else survives. It requires no spraying, no fertilizing, no irrigation once established, and it lives for 75 to 150 years, producing fruit the entire time. A mature American persimmon tree produces 50 to 75 pounds of fruit per year. The fruit, which ripens after the first frost, converting its tannins to sugars, tastes like brown sugar, apricot mixed with cinnamon. It is extraordinarily sweet. Dried, it stores for months. Frozen, it keeps for a year. Baked into breads and puddings, it is one of the most distinctive flavors in American food heritage. But here is what puts persimmon at number 9 instead of higher. It requires a male and female tree for production, meaning you need at least 2 trees. That is a minor inconvenience that is worth every bit of the return. 2 persimmon trees planted today will be feeding someone from your family in the year 2100. There are very few investments of any kind that you can say that about. Number 8. Chestnut. Here is a tree that was once the most important food tree in the entire eastern United States, and that was wiped from the landscape by a fungal blight in the early 20th century. And here is why that matters for you right now. Blight-resistant chestnut varieties have been developed and are available today, which means you can plant the tree that fed this continent for millennia and expect it to stand and produce for your grandchildren. The American chestnut in its original form grew 100 feet tall and lived hundreds of years. Between the Appalachian Mountains and the Atlantic Ocean, it made up an estimated 25% of the entire forest canopy. Native Americans, colonists, and generations of Appalachian families ate chestnuts as a primary calorie source. The nuts are unique among tree nuts because they are high in complex carbohydrates rather than fat, closer to a grain than a typical nut, making them one of the few trees that can genuinely substitute for staple crop calories. Blight-resistant hybrid chestnuts, crosses between American and Chinese or Japanese varieties, are productive, disease-resistant, and available from numerous nurseries. They begin bearing nuts in 3 to 5 years, much faster than most trees on this list. And a mature tree produces 20 to 50 pounds of nuts per year and can live 50 to 100 years. Chestnuts must be eaten or preserved quickly after harvest. They do not store raw like walnuts, but dried, roasted, or ground into flour. They keep for months and provide a versatile, high-calorie food source that requires nothing from you after planting except the patience to wait for maturity. Number 7. Fig. The fig tree has been cultivated by human beings for at least 11,000 years. Let that number settle in for a moment. 11,000 years, before written language, before the wheel, before every civilization we know by name, people were growing fig trees and eating the fruit. That is not a coincidence. That is a track record. A fig tree in the right climate, zones 7 through 11 in the ground, or zones 5 and above in containers brought in for winter, produces 2 crops per year on a mature tree. The first crop, called the breba crop, comes in early summer on last year's wood. The second and main crop ripens in late summer through fall. A mature fig tree produces 20 to 60 pounds of fruit per year depending on the variety and growing conditions. Figs require almost no care. No spraying. Figs have almost no serious pest or disease pressure in North American climates. Minimal pruning. No fertilizer beyond basic compost once a year. Once established, a fig tree is one of the lowest maintenance, highest reward food trees you can grow. And the preservation options are extraordinary. Fresh figs are one of the most sublime foods on earth. Dried figs store for 6 to 12 months and are calorie-dense survival food. Fig jam stores for years. If you live in zones 7 and above and you do not have a fig tree in your yard, you are missing one of the simplest, most reliable, most ancient sources of free food available to you. Plant a fig. Feed your family the way human beings have been feeding themselves for 11,000 years. Number 6. Pear. Most people who grow fruit trees choose apples first. I want to make the case today that pears deserve to go in the ground before apples, and here is why. Pear trees, specifically European pear varieties on standard rootstocks, live longer than apple trees, significantly longer. While a standard apple tree lives 50 to 80 years in ideal conditions, a standard European pear tree routinely lives 100 to 150 years, and some documented specimens have lived 200 to 300 years and are still producing. If you are planting a tree for 100 years of family food production, pear gives you more time than almost anything else, with fruit you already know and love. A mature pear tree produces 150 to 300 pounds of fruit per year at peak productivity, more than almost any other fruit tree on this list. Pears store well harvested, slightly underripe, and kept cool. They hold for 2 to 3 months without refrigeration. Canned, they store for years. Dried pear slices keep for months. And pear cider and perry-fermented pear beverages are traditional preservation methods that have stored pear harvests through winter for centuries. Choose varieties on standard rootstocks, not dwarfing rootstocks, for long-term longevity. Bartlett, Bosc, and Camas are classics. Asian pears are even longer-lived and more disease-resistant in many climates, and plant 2 varieties for cross-pollination. Pears are not reliably self-fertile and produce far better with a pollination partner. Number 5. Quince. Here is the fruit that was more important than the apple across most of human history, and that most Americans today cannot identify in a grocery store. Quince. Cydonia oblonga was the golden apple of Greek mythology. It was the fruit associated with Aphrodite. It was cultivated throughout the ancient Mediterranean, the Middle East, Persia, and Europe for thousands of years before the apple became dominant. And the reason it faded from prominence is the same reason so many foods on this channel fade from prominence. It does not ship well, it does not look attractive raw, and the modern food industry had no use for it. Raw quince is astringent and hard, but cooked, and this is critical, it transforms completely. The flesh turns from white to deep rose pink or amber. The flavor becomes rich, aromatic, and complex like a floral honeyed pear. Quince paste, quince jam, quince jelly, and quince poached in wine are some of the most extraordinary preserved foods in the world. And cooked quince stores exceptionally well. A quince tree produces 50 to 100 pounds of fruit per year. It is remarkably disease-resistant compared to apple and pear. It has natural resistance to many of the fungal diseases that plague other tree fruit. It tolerates a wide range of soils and climates, zones 5 through 9. It is largely self-fertile, meaning one tree produces without a pollination partner, and it lives 50 to 100 years. This is a tree that serious food growers know and that almost no one else plants. That gap between what it deserves and how little attention it gets is your opportunity. Number 4. Mulberry. We are in the top 4 now, and I make no apologies for putting the mulberry this high on a list of 100-year food trees, because the math on the mulberry is staggering, and most people have no idea. A mature mulberry tree, and there are documented mulberry trees in Europe and Asia that are 500 years old, and still producing, can yield 50 to 100 pounds of fruit per year. Some large established specimens produce significantly more. The fruit is sweet, rich, and available in enormous quantities for 2 to 4 weeks in early summer. White, red, and black varieties each have distinct flavors ranging from honey sweet to deep, complex, and wine-like. Mulberries are extraordinarily easy to process and preserve. Freeze them raw, they freeze perfectly, retaining flavor and nutrition for up to a year. Dry them, dried mulberries store for months and taste like intensely sweet raisins. Make wine, jam, syrup, or juice. The processing options are limited only by your time and creativity. The tree itself is virtually indestructible. It tolerates drought, poor soil, urban pollution, and neglect with equal equanimity. It requires no spraying. Pest and disease pressure on mulberries is minimal. It requires minimal pruning. Once it is established, it takes care of itself and produces prolifically every summer without fail. Cities across America have tried to ban the fruiting female mulberry because it is too productive. It drops so much fruit it stains sidewalks and becomes a so-called nuisance. A fruit tree so abundant that cities try to ban it because it makes too much food. That is the tree I want in my yard. That is the tree you should want in yours. Number 3. Olive. For those of you in zones 8 through 11, and with climate patterns shifting, that zone is expanding. The olive tree belongs near the top of this list. In fact, if you live where olives grow, they may belong at number 1. The olive tree is the oldest continuously cultivated food tree on Earth. Specimens in the Mediterranean are documented at over 2,000 years old and are still producing olives. 2,000 years. The same tree, still making food, still feeding people. That is a level of longevity that makes every other tree on this list look like a short-term investment. A mature olive tree produces 40 to 100 pounds of fruit per year. From that fruit, you harvest table olives cured in brine for months. They store for years in olive oil, one of the most calorie-dense, shelf-stable, and medicinally valuable food products in existence. Properly stored olive oil keeps for 18 to 24 months and provides fats essential for nutrition and cooking in any scenario. Olive trees require almost nothing. They are extraordinarily drought-tolerant. They thrive in poor rocky alkaline soils where nothing else produces. They require no spraying in most North American climates. And once they reach maturity, typically 5 to 12 years depending on variety and conditions, they simply produce, year after year. For centuries, if you are in a warm climate and you are not growing olives, you are leaving behind one of the oldest food security systems in human civilization. Plant one now. Your great-great-grandchildren will still be harvesting from it. Number 2. Apple. I know you were expecting apple at number 1, and the apple deserves everything I'm about to say about it. But there is one tree that edges it out, and I will tell you why in a moment. The apple tree is the most important fruit tree in American food history. It fed colonists through harsh New England winters. It provided cider, the primary beverage of early America that was safe to drink when water wasn't. It was dried, stored, fermented, pressed, and preserved in every form imaginable. Johnny Appleseed was not planting apple trees because apples were delicious. He was planting them because apples were survival. A standard apple tree on a seedling rootstock lives 50 to 100 years and produces 400 to 800 pounds of fruit per year at full maturity. Those are numbers almost nothing else in the food garden can match. 400 to 800 pounds per year. From one tree, the preservation options for apples are almost unlimited. Fresh storage in a cool cellar for 3 to 6 months. Dried apple slices for 12 months or more. Applesauce, canned, for years. Apple cider vinegar shelf-stable essentially indefinitely, and one of the most useful substances in a self-sufficient household. Hard cider, apple butter, dehydrated rings. The apple is not just a fruit, it is a preservation platform. Choose varieties on standard rootstocks for maximum longevity. Heritage varieties like Roxbury Russet, Black Oxford, and Newtown Pippin are documented at living 100 years or more in orchard conditions. Plant 2 varieties for cross-pollination. Give them space, basic annual pruning, and they will feed your family for a century. Number 1. Black Mulberry, Morus nigra. I put the standard mulberry at number 4. Here at number 1 is its ancient, extraordinary relative, the black mulberry, and the distinction matters enormously. The black mulberry, Morus nigra, is not the common mulberry most Americans know. It is a different species entirely, native to Western Asia and the Middle East, where it has been cultivated for at least 4,000 years. It grows more slowly than red or white mulberry. It is more particular about its climate zones. 6 through 9 are ideal, and it produces fruit that is in an entirely different category of quality, deeply rich, complex, intensely sweet tart, dark as night, with a flavor that makes the common red mulberry taste like a rough draft. But here is why the black mulberry is number 1 on a list of 100-year food trees. Documented black mulberry trees in England, Italy, Iran, and Turkey are confirmed at 300 to 500 years old. Some are believed to be over 1,000 years old, and they are still producing, still fruiting every summer, still feeding families from a tree that was alive when Shakespeare was born, when the Aztec Empire fell, when Columbus was crossing the Atlantic. That is not a food tree. That is a monument that also happens to feed you. A mature black mulberry produces 20 to 40 pounds of exceptionally high-quality fruit per year, less in raw weight than the common mulberry, but far superior in flavor and nutritional density. The fruit is extraordinarily high in antioxidants, vitamin C, iron, and resveratrol. It is one of the most medicinally studied fruits in traditional medicine across 3 continents. The black mulberry asks for patience. It grows slowly in its early years and may take 10 to 15 years to reach full production. That is the price of admission for a tree that will outlive not just you but your children, your grandchildren, and quite possibly your great-grandchildren. When you plant a black mulberry, you are not just feeding your family. You are making a decision about the kind of world you are leaving behind, one with deep roots, long memory, and food that comes back every summer without fail, decade after decade after decade. Plant 1 tree this season. In 50 years it will be the most valuable thing on your property. In 100 years it will still be there, loaded with fruit every summer, long after the grocery stores that charged you $6 for a pint of berries are a memory. That is number 1. That is the tree. Here is what I want you to understand after watching this. The most powerful thing you can do for your family's food security is not buying more canned goods. It is not stocking up on freeze-dried meals. It is not building a bigger pantry. It is putting living food systems in the ground, right now, systems that compound over time, that produce more as they age, and that cannot be inflated, disrupted, or taken from a store shelf. Every one of these 10 trees can be planted this season. Every one of them produces food that feeds not just you but the people who come after you. And every one of them does it without electricity, without monthly costs, and without any dependence on a supply chain that is becoming less reliable every year. This is not a hobby. This is the oldest and most proven food security strategy in human history. The families who understood this and acted on it, the ones who planted trees decades ago, are eating from those trees right now. You can be that family. But the time to plant a tree is always 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Hit subscribe for a new video every few days. Real strategies, real plants, real food security, no filler, no fluff. And comment below. Which of these 10 trees are you planting first? I read every comment and I will reply. Let's build something your grandchildren will thank you for.